Hey everyone, this is Andy from Immediate Arabic, and today we're going to attempt to answer the age old question of what should I study, Fusha or Ammiya, or what some people will call MSA. So, Fusha is really kind of the classical Arabic there, and MSA is very, very close to it. That's what a lot of people will study first. It is really the official language of about 22 countries in and around North Africa, the Middle East. And Ammiya, which basically means slang, is really what we would refer to here in the English language as more of a dialect. So we have the written version of the language, which we're going to call Fusha for the rest of the video. And then we have the spoken language, which we're going to call Ammiya. So every country, again, has, or every country that has Arabic as their official language, has a number of dialects within it. So let's look at these real quick. You have the Iraqi dialect in Iraq. You have the Levantine dialects, which we usually put into countries like Jordan, Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. And of course, all those are different. You have the Egyptian dialect, which is certainly different from all the others. You have the Gulf dialects. You have those in Morocco as well. Libya has their own dialect. So you have a gazillion dialects because within these dialects, there's even more dialects. And while they all are kind of like the great great grandson of Fusha, they are definitely different. And that's what we're going to attempt to answer here. And I will tell you this, if you want to skip the rest of the video, there is no one single answer to say what should you learn. But we are going to tell you what we think most people should probably learn. And it's not going to be just one. So let's begin. All right, let's do this. Let's look at a few of the positives and the negatives of learning Fusha. First off, the positives. Number one, almost everybody in the Arab world speaks Fusha because they learn it in school. Now, when I say almost everybody, I don't believe I've ever met somebody who didn't speak Fusha, but I have met some people who didn't speak it very well. And I know that there are people out there that don't. They either didn't learn it in school, but you do have to remember it is the language of the Quran, so many people do know it. And with this, let's look at some case studies. If you speak Fusha, you can travel virtually to anywhere in the Arab world, North Africa world, where Arabic is spoken, and you can have a conversation, you can communicate, you can solve problems. If you only know a dialect, then if you go over to, if you know the Iraqi dialect and you're visiting Syria, you may or may not always be able to have the greatest of conversation. The same goes if you know Levantine Arabic and you run over to Iraq. It's just not going to work. And I've literally, more times than one, seen individuals who could not communicate from their dialect to another one. Case study, my old business partner. If the story I remember correctly was she had a roommate or a hallmate, I can't remember which, and the hallmate was from Morocco, and my friend was from Jordan. Well, it just didn't match up. They could not speak their dialects and really understand each other totally. So they switched to Fusha, problem solved. Years ago, I was taking a tutoring lesson. I was in a library with a young lady from Iraq, and a young Saudi gentleman walked in. They started having a conversation. When they got done with it, I asked, "Did you guys finish up in Ammiya or Fusha?" And she said, "Well, we had to switch over to Fusha because we couldn't understand each other." So there are two case studies that shows you just how important it is, not just for us who's learning Arabic as a second language, but also for people who have it as the first language. So again, the point here is you'll be able to communicate with virtually anybody who speaks Arabic if you know Fusha. What are the other pluses? Some of the other pluses are virtually everything that is put out in print is in Fusha. So if you're going to learn to read and write, you might as well do it in Fusha, because that's what virtually every paper, if you go on the internet and look at like BBC Arabic or CNN Arabic, that's all going to be done in Fusha. And you'll also find a lot of documentaries, media, stuff like that is going to be done in Fusha. And you'll even see, I guess, higher up meetings in government and or business that will sometimes be done in Fusha as well. So it's not like it's never spoken. It's just not normally spoken on the street or in the homes a whole lot. So those are some of the positives, and I think really important positives is that you will be able to communicate with virtually anybody in the Arab world if you speak Fusha. Now, the negatives of speaking Fusha is if somebody decides they're not going to speak Fusha back to you, well, you're going to have a hard time understanding them. And I can definitely say this on many occasions. When I lived in Jordan, I would speak to taxi drivers in Fusha. They would answer me in Ammiya, and I had a really difficult time, especially in the beginning, trying to figure out what they meant. As the months went on, my Ammiya got a little bit better, and it was a little bit easier. And I had a lot of cab drivers who would literally switch over to Fusha for me, which was awesome and very nice. That being said, not all of them did it. The other downside is Fusha does sound a little bit, how should I put this, a little haughty-taughty. It sounds a little bit like Shakespearean English when you're talking to somebody. So some people may feel a little bit uncomfortable. They may not be fully comfortable in their Fusha. So those are just things that you need to consider. Now, those are the positive and negatives, or some of the positives and negatives with Fusha. So what would our suggestions be here? Our suggestions would be probably to start learning a dialect as soon as possible. Why do we say this? Because I think you'll open up a huge another avenue. And every dialect is different, but if you know a little bit of Fusha and a little bit of Ammiya, usually you can probably work around. So if you know some Levantine dialect and you know Fusha and you meet somebody from Iraq, you'll probably be able to figure things out, even though Iraqi dialect and Levantine dialect are very different. There are times when I would tell somebody, don't learn Fusha. And here's kind of a story based on a case study, if you will. We had a client who was a translator. She was learning Arabic basically so she could talk to her mother-in-law, who knew no English whatsoever, had lived on a farm in, I think it was Lebanon. And that was her main reason for learning Arabic. But she also started out learning Fusha as well. And she was a professional translator. She thought that maybe in a few years she might be able to add that kind of to her resume. So she literally started learning Fusha and some Ammiya basically at the same time. But if you had somebody and the only thing you were ever going to do with it was talk to somebody, then I would say pick out that dialect and learn only that dialect, because it's not important for you. You're not going to be traveling. You're not going to be meeting other people. You're only learning that dialect so that you can speak with that one person most likely. And that's okay. Again, there is no one single answer. Now, here's kind of our final thoughts on this. My suggestion, this is based on me as an English speaker who has utilized Arabic, work, travel, pleasure, and just having good times, is to learn probably about 50% of your total Arabic in Fusha. This gives you the ability to read, write, speak, and communicate with individuals from different countries. Our other suggestion, along with that, is to learn another 40% of a dialect which you like or which you think you will use more. Obviously, if you are going to be stationed maybe in Iraq, in I don't know, in maybe the embassy, well, then you would probably want to learn some Ammiya, some Iraqi Ammiya. If you were going to be doing missionary work in, say, Jordan, then maybe you'd want to learn the Levantine dialect. If you are going to be traveling and living in Palestine, again, Levantine dialects. So our suggestion is, again, 50% Fusha, 40% Ammiya, your choice. And I would leave that other little 10% open for meeting new people, traveling to different places, because you'll want to get to know their local greetings. So if you happen to study Fusha, maybe you're a college student and you study mostly Fusha, maybe some Levantine dialect, you're sitting there studying Al Kitab every day for 4 years. My suggestion is you probably at some point you're going to roll over to Egypt or Jordan or wherever and learn the basic greetings, the basic conversational skills of that dialect as well. You'll probably be immersed in it, and you'll end up being able to pick up the patterns and learn that. So, final rule of thumb for most people in order to communicate as a non-native speaker of Arabic: 50% Fusha, 40% Ammiya, and 10% wherever you go, learn the basic greetings, learn the basic conversation skills. That's about all we have to say about that. Everybody's going to be different. You have to decide what's best for you. That is a general suggestion for most of you out there, especially if you're studying in some sort of university. Don't make the mistake I made and start learning um, dialects like 3 and 4 years into learning Arabic, because it's a bad idea. Start after you get a few weeks of Fusha down your throat. Go ahead and start learning some Ammiya and just let that build as time goes on. So this is Andy from Immediate Arabic. If anybody's looking to learn Fusha with a little bit of Levantine Ammiya, we have probably one of the fastest programs in the world. We'd love to have you as a student, and we'd love to talk to you. So good luck in your language journey. Ma salama.